Kyle, good to speak with you. I want to start by getting your reaction to these personnel decisions, elevating China hawks like Marco Rubio and Congressman Mike Waltz. It's very much a get tough on China message. Is it the right get tough on China message that the incoming administration is sending?
Yeah, look, first of all, pleasure to be here. When you describe everyone as a China hawk, I would just call them China realists. I mean, Xi Jinping has been telling you what he's going to do since 2017 in every public speech, every public appearance he's made, and truthfully, every meeting he's had with U.S. officials. So when we start realizing that China is not our friend, and if you read the Director of National Intelligence's annual threat assessment report to Congress, in no uncertain words do we say China is the largest threat to U.S. national security. So I think it's important to note that our leadership has done a poor job in explaining to the American public what kind of threat China actually presents. Now, I've worked closely with Marco Rubio and his staff over the years, and several of the other people that are being nominated here, and these people understand the enormity of the threat that China poses to the Western world and to the security of the United States. So again, whether you call them hawkish or realists, what we're doing here is we need to stop affording China these battlefield asymmetries that we're giving them, and we can go one by one the asymmetries we've advanced. But Rubio is a very, very strong pick for Secretary of State. He will bring with him the gravitas, and I think the Democrats are really worried about Trump's stance on ending the Ukrainian war in one day by ceding advances to Putin. And if you know Rubio, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think we've got to be realizing that all of the bad guys are all together in fighting against the West, and putting Rubio in place, putting in Treasury Secretary. You guys started talking about the markets. Like the markets are factoring in Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent becoming
Kyle,
the next Secretary.
let me follow up on that point. We're talking about the markets. What does this mean, these kinds of picks mean for Chinese assets? And how would you personally, your firm, express it beyond the Hong Kong dollar short that I believe you had last year?
Right. We have no other positions on other than that position. We've carried that position since 2017, just to be clear. If you invested in China 16 years ago in their largest equity index, the Shenzhen Shanghai 300, their GDP went up 505% in the last 16 years, and you've lost a third of your money being invested in their markets. Just imagine losing a third of your money in a nation that's grown its GDP 500%. When the U.S. has grown our GDP about 75%, and you're up 400% in your S&P 500 investments. Investing in China is a fool's errand. It is, no one has ever made money in the long term investing in communism, and no one ever will. And so investing in China, again, is a horrible idea going forward.
But Kyle, I mean, you have to understand why people are interested in that. It isn't really any sort of ideology on communism versus capitalism. It's on, a billion people who are, at least in theory, seeing an increase in their wealth, an increase in their capacity to spend. And, look, if you're an investor, you're a global investor, you want to have some link to the world's second largest economy, don't you?
No. Romaine, I think that's, again, I think that's flawed thinking. I think that if you're investing in an economy with the architecture of the Chinese Communist Party and the Standing Committee, you don't have to do anything. I think that, yes, there are 1.3 billion people that are trying to be elevated from various levels of poverty to the middle class and the upper class. But again, if you've been invested long-term in China, you've lost a lot of money. Yeah. When you didn't have to discount communism, you didn't have to discount Xi Jinping, you didn't have to discount which business he decided was going to succeed or lose. You didn't have to discount any of those things in the United States, and you've done incredibly well. I just think as a fiduciary, you're breaching your fiduciary responsibilities if you make that investment.
Well, this gets to, I think, that kind of broader esoteric conversation about American exceptionalism, and I'm speaking strictly from the standpoint of financial markets and the returns that folks have had here. And as you know, every portfolio manager, at least the ones that went through a traditional sort of training in our schools here, was probably taught this idea about geographic diversification and the idea don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what I'm hearing from a lot more people, and I assume you'll probably fall into the same camp, is that the U.S., or at least North America, is primarily the basket where you want to put all your eggs. Is that a mischaracterization?
No, it's not. I think it's right. And look, yes, are there exceptions? Are there other economies like Mexico, where now our largest trading partners are Mexico and Canada, no longer China? The U.S. is 4% of the world's population.
Yeah.
We are a quarter of the world's GDP, and we are 46% of the world's capital markets. Just think about that for a second. The world votes with its money, and it votes here. And I think that this is the place where your money is the safest. I also think that the new Trump administration is going to engage in a regulatory clean out, right? You're going to see a new head of the FTC. You should see mergers and acquisitions pick up right away.
Yeah.
You should see a new head of the SEC, a new head of the OCC, the FDIC. You're going to see the animalistic spirits released on our economy that have been withheld over the last 4 years.
Well, you've certainly already seen that in public markets over the last few days, as I think a lot of people anticipate those changes come January. Have you been in discussions at all with the Trump administration? Do you have any role, informal or otherwise?
I have no role at the moment, but I do know many of the people that are being chosen for, many of these positions, and they are people I admire, people that are friends of mine. And I think the single most important nomination for financial markets will be Secretary of the Treasury, and I think Scott Bessent is the odds-on favorite there. And I think that when people understand the way Scott thinks and his brilliance, and the markets are already factoring in Scott Bessent's opportunity here, and I think that when that day comes, it'll be a very positive day for markets.
Scuttlebutt is that he is the front runner. With regards to some of those other positions, particularly at the SEC, who do you want to see leading that agency?
I don't know who the front runner is for the SEC. I do think that, when we're talking about the people we're talking about for the CIA, for the Secretary of Defense, for Secretary of State and Rubio and others, we're starting to see really a fantastic lineup of people that have real depth in their understanding of this position. And I think that the belief was coming into this election that who would join a second Trump administration, given what happened to the first Trump administration and with their legal problems. I think I am wildly impressed with who's stepping up and who's taking some of these seats. Jay Clayton, the former chair of the SEC, is likely to be the Attorney General. I think he is a fantastic pick for Attorney General. Whether it's Patel at the CIA or someone else, or whether it's Ratcliffe as Secretary of Defense, like all of these people will be phenomenal folks. And I think you have to realize, right, we have a ground war in Europe. We have Israel versus Iran, and we're about to have China, Taiwan. We better put together a cabinet that has gravitas, and I think Trump is putting that cabinet together.